And welcome to the very first full in-person 7-person board meeting as we hopefully start to see the light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic. Great to have everybody back. Welcome, and our new board members here as well. I'm actually the straggler coming back last. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Lake Bluff District 65 Board of Education meeting from May 25th, 2021. Our board members and members of the district's administrative team are participating in a hybrid meeting as there is currently a requirement on group sizes in an effort to limit the spread of COVID-19. As a public body, the Lake Bluff Board of Education is subject to the Illinois Open Meetings Act. And prior to this meeting, a public announcement was posted on our website announcing various participation options, including asking questions ahead of the meeting using a Google form. In addition, community members can comment live during public comment periods if they are viewing on Zoom by using the raise your hand feature. The Zoom link is found on our website. Please be assured that while the requirements of the Open Meeting Act have been relaxed during the global pandemic, the members of the Board of Education take their responsibilities as board members who are responsible to the public no less seriously. So can we please have a roll call?
We can. Andy Duran.
Present.
Ann Hill, present. Mark Berry.
Present.
Carrie Steinbach. Present. Tim Penich.
Present.
Amy Connell Donahue.
Present.
Lauren Hirsch.
Present.
Great. Now this is nice to do in public for once. Can you guys all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One thing I think we need to explain is our dress code tonight. I think we are celebrating Pajama Day at the elementary school. Is that where it was? Not at the middle school,
right.
just at the elementary school?
And the ABC countdown.
And the ABC conference. So it's in honor of Pajama Day at the elementary school. We are all dressed appropriately.
Thank you to Lauren.
Thanks to Lauren.
Absolutely.
Now, as we do in every meeting, we offer the opportunity for public comment. If anybody would like to comment to the board, please raise your hand on Zoom and let us know. Remember to state your name and keep your comments to about 3 minutes. Do we have anybody who'd like to comment to the board? Shelley?
No written comments via Google Doc.
All right. Just as a reminder, you will have the opportunity to comment at the end of the meeting. Does anybody on the board have public comment? Okay, moving on.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just like to say I received in my mailbox, like snail mail mailbox today, as I think did every other parent in 65. Thank you from the staff. And that was really, really unexpected and special and awesome. So thank you back.
We absolutely appreciate how much work it's been the last 18 months to partner with us on remote learning and all the different ways that we've needed your support. So we're happy that those arrived and thankful to the Rotary Club for helping us. And we have some information there from Leeds. So please patronize the businesses in Lake Bluff. And again, thank you for your support.
So moving on, again, as we do at every meeting, we offer the opportunity for the addition of a future agenda item or a brief discussion this evening. If anybody on the board has ideas for future agenda items, please feel free to raise them. If you're not comfortable or you don't think of it now, we can always email myself or Dr. Leali in the future. And later on in the agenda, when we talk about reviewing that board development meeting we had some follow-ups, which might make good agenda items. So I'll circle back to that when I go over that. But if people have ideas now, don't hesitate. Similarly, if people have discussion items that, as long as we're not voting on it or making big decisions, something that you just learned about and want to share with the board of the community, this is the time to do that. And we can briefly engage in discussions as well. So if anybody wants anything to raise anything, feel free. Not hearing anything. I think we have a little bit of a celebration tonight, some recognition for members of our finance team.
We absolutely do. So we have been notified that our comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 2020 qualified for, and I want to get the name of the organization right, the Government Finance Officers Association of US and Canada Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. And I want to acknowledge first and foremost, Jay Kahn and his department, Jenny Sikora for payroll, and Tammy Robards for accounts payable. But I do want to say, in addition to all that excellence, they were doing much, much more than just that this year. And so I just want to acknowledge that they're always excellent, but this year just went above and beyond. So glad to recognize the whole department.
I think this has become a pattern for Jay and his team. You guys are doing great work. Should I read what it says on these? I think they're both the same language, but on both of these, what do they call this? A certificate. It says the award of financial. My eyes are so bad. I have to make it really big. Sorry. The award of financial reporting achievement is presented by the Government Finance Officers Association to the department or individual designated as instrumental in the government unit achieving a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. A certificate of achievement is presented to those government units whose annual financial reports are judged to adhere to program standards and represents the highest award in government financial reporting. So thank you. We appreciate all you guys' great work.
Absolutely.
Can I say a few words, Mark?
Can you what?
Can I say a few words?
Yeah, please, please, please.
I just wanted to, usually in this type of work, in these positions, one only often gets attention when something goes wrong. And so I wanted to publicly recognize both Tammy and Jenny for the outstanding work that they do every day. Tammy Robards received an award from the GFOA for outstanding performance in accounts payable, which is what she does in her spare time when she's not dealing with busing, registration, food service, workers' comp, or facility reservations. All the bills in the district, all the bills the district pays go through Tammy. She has to make sure that everything gets booked to the right account and is well documented. And because the district is on an accrual basis, she also needs to make sure that it's recorded in the correct fiscal year. And it's quite a bit of work. And she does it really well. Jenny Sikora received an award from the GFOA for outstanding performance in payroll. And those outside of education probably don't have a full appreciation for how complex school payroll is, but there is a mix of both salaried and hourly employees. There are winter, summer, spring breaks, leaves of absences. Most people do multiple jobs and get paid for additional duties. There are 2 different pension systems with different rules and reporting requirements. And then there are the payroll taxes, insurance, flex benefits, deferred compensation plans, et cetera, as well as doing background checks and certification when we hire people. The payroll system generates the majority of the accounting entries, and it can get very messy very fast if you don't know what you're doing. So I take a lot of flack for going on vacation at inopportune times, like first week of school or in the middle of financial audit. But I would never feel comfortable enough to do that, but for the confidence I have in these 2 ladies. This is a well-deserved honor, and I feel really fortunate to have both Tammy and Jenny on our team. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jay. So now we're going to move on to our reports. And for the first time in a while, we're not having Carrie do a PTO report. We're having Nicole Elliott. Is she going to pop up on our screen?
I should be. I don't know. Wait, hold on. I have to start video as well. It's working. Hold on. There we go. Hi, everyone. Mark, you may be the only one I don't really know. So welcome. My name is Nicole Elliott, and thank you for having me. To all the board members and administration, thank you for all you do. It's been a tough year. And we as a PTO look forward to partnering in the next year as we get a little bit more back to normal. As mentioned, I am taking on the role as the district PTO president for the 2021 through 2023 school years. I have some huge shoes to fill. It's going to be a hard job, as Carrie has done such an amazing job in the role. We're so appreciative of her leadership, especially during these challenging last 2 years. So thanks so much, Carrie. As for the update, we, as a PTO, have been able to pretty much remain neutral in our bank account, basically, because of the ongoing small fundraisers that we've been continuing to have. So throughout the last 15 months, with the support of these fundraising initiatives, we've managed to raise about $3,000 through wrapping paper sales. Spiritware has brought in about $2,200. Bluffer nights, such as the one being held at Baked Nights. If you haven't had dinner, please order from there. And the recent Stan's Donuts fundraiser, all together, those have brought in about $1,800 this year and counting. And then also our holiday and teacher gift campaigns have brought in a significant amount. And then we give that back, to the teachers, both at the holiday time and the end of the year. We look forward to resuming our Pumpkin Fest and a Chase in the fall. And we will also be having a spring fundraising social event next year. We'll be providing more details of these when we get back in the early fall. Through these fundraisers, we've been able to support our teachers and staff by funding initiatives such as Teacher, Staff, and Administration Appreciation. Thank you, Lauren Hirsch. You've done an amazing job this year, thinking up so many creative ways to recognize and encourage those who lead and support our students. My favorite is still the Charmin toilet paper. The trip around the world, themed appreciation, complete with food, beverages, notes of encouragement. It's all been great this year. The 8th grade graduation, everybody's very excited to have this year, and are able to have it outside on June 7th. The LBMS scoreboard, when we get to resume sports inside, that's going to be great to have. The LBMS students, community members, PE teachers, I know especially, will really enjoy having this functionality again. And then our PTO also coordinates yearbook fund collection and distribution, the online student directory through the A to Z app, and the collection and giving of holiday and teacher gifts, as mentioned. So just as a quick overview too, PTO this year has done a lot more to link with the FAN network, which is the Family Action Network. For all who have yet to try to look into this, if you search Family Action Network on Google, it has some amazing initiatives for education on inclusion, substance education, adolescent development, and more. These are all free. And there's some great topics, usually about twice a month or more. So I encourage everyone to check that out. We also have representatives in PTO who help link us to Alliance and the initiatives they're doing, and our APT at the high school. So with all that said, that's pretty much an overview of our PTO. We're going to keep our normal schedule on Wednesdays next year. We are going to keep it virtual, as that's a feedback from current members to have that flexibility. And we'll also have meetings about once a semester in person to provide the communal aspect and the social opportunity to meet. So I have to put out a public announcement that we're still looking for 2 positions, which are the LBES chair and the district treasurer for the upcoming 2 years. So if there's anyone interested, please feel free to reach out to me and we can provide more information. So that's about all I have. If there are any questions, please let me know, but we look forward to partnering with all of you in the upcoming school year and continuing our support.
Nicole, how does somebody reach you if they're interested in those positions?
Thank you. My email address is ELLIOTT, and as in Nicole, R as in Rachel, @gmail.com.
Thanks.
We really appreciate everything the PTO has done for us this year, even in such a challenging and unique year. They came through with so many different opportunities for our kids and teachers, and we could not be more grateful for your help. And we look forward to working with Nicole.
And who knew Lauren was the creative genius behind it? I did not know that. That's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicole.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a nice night. So we're going to move on to, I think we have 2 reports from our principals, Mr. Blackmer and Mrs. Bay. Who'd like to go first? Kelly.
I'm happy to start tonight. Good evening, everyone, and welcome board members to your first meeting in your new seat. Really glad to have you there. So tonight, just want to take an opportunity to present some end of year dates and just make sure that parents, community members, and anyone watching has information about things that are coming up as we wrap up the school year. So you mentioned the ABC countdown. So that is ongoing each day. We are either dressing up or doing something that aligns to that letter of the alphabet. So P for Pajama Day today. Thank you for joining in School Spirit with us. And we've got some great days to just kind of round out the year. So anything from Quiet Day tomorrow, Sunglasses Day on Friday, favorite t-shirt day, Wacky Socks Day are some of the things coming up. I think that on Monday, June 7th, we are exchanging affirmations. So that's kind of a nice play on the letter X, which can be difficult to fill. So just a day to compliment and affirm one another. So I think it's been a really good experience to just kind of increase some engagement and motivation to just round out the year. And it's nice that students at home and here at school can participate in those activities. A couple of other things that we have we are having an in-person book fair. So information with some details regarding the book fair did go out via School Messenger yesterday. LBES is hosting the book fair for the entire district in our multi-purpose room. So there are details that went out for families to just check their email. We've got a couple of days that we are really trying to allocate for in-person on June 1st and 2nd. And then June 3rd and 4th, we're trying to hold tight for remote families or middle school families to come and enjoy the book fair. We're partnering with PTO and the Lake Forest Bookstore. So just want to give a shout out to both of those groups. Mrs. Soule has put in a ton of work. Some PTO members have really partnered to create a way for a safe experience and an opportunity to promote summer reading. So thanks to all involved. There'll be another flyer coming out with some additional information, and you can reach out to Paige Soule or myself if you have questions. We're looking forward to the book fair. June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, we are hosting in-person field day experiences. We also have a parallel remote field day experience for remote learners. So each grade level gets a 1-hour block. There'll be 5 stations that they can rotate through, and just another way to create some familiar experiences. So I want to thank our wellness teachers, Jeremy Soleric, Ryan Reagan, and Eric Anderko for really being creative and continuing to innovate and find ways for safe field day experiences. I also want to give a shout out to PTO as they are coordinating some volunteers for this event to help facilitate the stations, and they're contributing to purchase some supplies so that we can have all the tools that we need for a successful event. More to come on the schedule for that, so parents are aware when their child will be participating in field day. And there'll be details around the remote experience as well. On June 7th, we have our 5th grade picnic in the afternoon. And so just another shout out to Lauren Hirsch and some other PTO members for coordinating up that event. I think it's going to be really memorable and special for our 5th graders to be able to walk over to the Park District and have some outdoor space to eat lunch and then engage in safely distanced experiences. And there's a special treat that's also coming on that day for our 5th graders. So thanks to all for creative thinking and really creating an opportunity for 5th grade students. We do have a rain date scheduled for that one on the 8th if we need it. On June 8th, we also have our 3rd annual Kid to Kid event. This is an opportunity for our 5th graders to take a leadership role and share either a talent or a passion with other members of the school community. So our enrichment team is really spearheading this event along with our 5th grade teachers. And it's a really nice experience. We've been forced to get innovative once again, as this typically is an opportunity where students are traveling all around the building. They're outside, they're meeting with all different groups. And so we've had to adjust that to make sure that we are safe. Last couple of things to just note, June 9th is our last day for students. It will be regular school hours. We're excited that that day will end with a 5th grade clap off. So very similar to a traditional clap off where students will lie in the hallways and 5th graders will exit the building. And then finally, June 10th will be the last day for staff. We have made a plan for device collection on June 9th. And so more information for parents will be coming their way. That was just made today, but I thought since we've got the platform, I'd put that out there. Last little piece, I'm going to be following up with a school messenger. Just want to make a request of parents as the weather warms up and plans can change at the end of the day. It's really a good idea to send a email to the classroom teacher to let them know if your child is getting home a different way. Sometimes this can get confusing. We definitely trust our students, but we can't always rely on them or their older siblings to communicate a change in transportation. So we would love to hear from you if they are walking instead of taking the bus or riding a bike or going home with a friend. So thank you all. Looking forward to, I don't know how many days are left. I'm not counting. I'm sure many of you out there are highly aware, but looking forward to ending the year strong. There's a lot to celebrate. So thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Kelly? Thank you for all the details. We appreciate it. Mr. Blackmer.
All right. So first of all, I want to start by thanking the 5th grade team. They were very flexible in allowing Mr. Jaxie and I to conduct the first ever virtual LBMS tour for our 5th grade students on Monday. I spent some time cruising around the building with my phone on a gimbal to try and keep a nice steady shot. Mr. Jaxie was manning the chat in the office. The kids had some great questions. They were very enthusiastic. And we are definitely looking forward to welcoming them in person in August. So I appreciate the 5th grade team being flexible and helping us out with that. If you're a 5th grade parent and watching tonight, you will inevitably have received an email from me earlier this afternoon. We recorded a parent orientation video that's about 32 minutes long, and it includes clips from the teachers who are summarizing sort of what's going to be taught in their classes in 6th grade. So parents will get a chance to see and hear from the teachers. I also provided a framework and an overview of a day in the life of a middle school student. And hopefully parents find that convenient to be able to watch that at a time that works for them. I know the end of the year is very busy, particularly given Kelly's update. I'm reminded just how many things are going on, even in these unusual circumstances. So middle school is right along with that, doing some things in the evenings coming up. So we've got Friday, June 4th is the 8th grade amazing race. So that's one of the end of the year social activities that our PTO has helped to coordinate and is doing in a safe and socially distant manner outside. But I definitely need to thank Eva Rice, Molly Harper, also Jane Duncan for coordinating and spearheading the graduation committee. These are difficult jobs under normal circumstances, and then I've gone ahead and thrown them a curveball and suggested we do graduation outside. So we're finalizing plans for that. Graduation will take place on Monday. This is June 7th at 6 o'clock in the east lot outside of our school. And we're going to be setting up a stage. We're grateful that there has been a change in recommendations from both the CDC and ultimately the Lake County Health Department that has allowed us to open up attendance. Initially, we had planned on only 2 in-person attendees per graduate. We've gone ahead and eliminated that limitation. And so if you're an 8th grade parent and you haven't responded to our survey yet, please do that. We're really counting for every chair and every space that we need to provide for families who are coming to watch the in-person ceremony. We're excited about that. I also almost forgot to mention the Friday before graduation, however, we will have the viewing party of this year's musical. We are doing High School Musical Junior, and it has been recorded. The vocals have been dubbed over the recordings that we did. These are our students singing along with performing on this online musical that we're doing. And we'll be viewing it as a school on Friday the 4th and pushing it out to parents so that they'll be able to view it from home and of course share it with their family members and friends. The kids have done a great job. Smaller crew this year just because of the format, about 35 kids involved. And our staff has just gone above and beyond to find a great way to make this happen. So we really appreciate that. And then just like Kelly had mentioned, we'll be right up to the last day of school. And for our 6th and 7th graders at the middle school, that's going to be June 9th. We'll be collecting the laptops also on that last day at LBMS. Lots to look forward to. Looking forward to a more normal looking school year when we bring the kids back in August. Parents of our incoming 6th graders, keep an eye out for the save the date for that locker day. And I know we're doing the same meet the teacher day at the same time. I believe that's August 23rd. So that'll be our first opportunity to bring kids back in person for the 2021-22 school year. Looking forward to it.
Anybody have any
Whenever-
follow?
Any
Anybody have any
questions?
questions for Mr. Blackmer?
I just wanted to say thank you for doing the tour on Monday. My 5th grader loved it and thought it
Well-
was so much fun and cool to watch. So thank you.
It was new and different. I've not had the opportunity to pop into classrooms and actually put kids on the screen and provide some feedback and answer some questions and actually be in a classroom. So I don't know that we'll do it that way every year, but under the circumstances, it worked very well. So thank you.
Anybody else? I have a couple follow-ups, Mr. Blackmer. One is very similar to Lauren's about the tour for the school. And thinking back to a million years ago when pre-COVID, when my guys were young and thinking about going to the middle school, they were very anxious. And you were really nice and opened up the building to them on numerous occasions and allowed them to learn how to do their combination lock and things that just really helped settle them down before the first day of school. I wonder if you've thought about that kind of stuff, because there are those kids out there, probably more anxious kids now than there were pre-pandemic.
Well, so one of the things that took 13 years to come to the realization of is that learning a new locker combination on a lock that's fixed to the locker door is a challenging thing. And so we fixed that problem, and we're going to be including the locks in the supply kit this year. Students will keep those locks throughout their career at the middle school, and they'll be using a traditional combination lock on our lockers as opposed to the very old school built-in combinations that have to be rolled over every year, require a large amount of manpower to do that. So we're excited to put that into action this year. So at least the locker piece hopefully will be less stressful for kids, but we are definitely going to enhance locker day and give students an opportunity to really get around the building. It's nice that our teachers will be there. And we have some of our Bluffer ambassadors, some of the older students who have really taken a liking to being kind of a tour guide and a person who has the knowledge to answer most any question that kids can come up with. So we'll have our Bluffer ambassadors on hand to help guide kids during that first day in the building. And certainly our advisors are well equipped to provide additional combination locker lessons if need be, help students read their schedule so that they know where and where to be and when. And to be very honest with you, for some of our returning students next year that are in 7th and 8th grade, they'll be experiencing the building in the same way that our 6th graders are. We've had a lot of kids who've been remote all year long. And so we're just going to have to take that into account and kind of provide everybody with some refreshers and some support as they come back into the building next year.
Will they have that lock at home before school starts to practice?
Yes, we have to work out exactly when they get those picked up. It will likely be on the day of locker day. They'll pick them up and take them home and have some time to spend with them. Although we may be able to find an opportunity to get them in hands earlier. That's something we got to work out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. A couple more questions. One has to do with the musical. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. I'm wondering, in this crazy time, is this something we're going to make available to the whole community? You talked about pushing it out to families. Is this something we could put on our website so that the community can link to and watch? Because I think people would love to see this in town.
Yes, and we were sure to buy the licensing to allow us to just kind of put it out there for everyone to see. So we will definitely publicize it and make sure that folks are able to access that in our community.
That's great, great. And then the last thing I want to do is bring the attention to the board. If you recall, in a recent update, I don't remember which one it was, from Dr. Leali, she requested if anybody on the board was interested in attending the 8th grade invitation graduation as a board member. That's a fun experience, especially if, I don't know if any of you guys have 8th graders graduating, but it's a big deal to be able to, shake hands with all these kids and hand out diplomas. Even if not, it's a fun thing. So if anybody wants to, I would encourage you to raise your hand because it's worth doing at least once. Thanks, Nate. And if anybody has any questions, we'll move on. No, thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to Mr. Khan. He's got a business office report for us.
You're muted, Jay.
It's not like we've been doing this for 18 months.
We just want to remind people the deadline for signing up for transportation is July 1st. After that date, fees will double. We will not be prorating fees next year. This year and last year due to the pandemic, we were very flexible with transportation adds and drops, but next year we're getting back to normal and will not be prorating during the year. Fee waiver applications are available as part of registration. And I also just wanted to remind people we will be distributing free food again this summer. We're still getting feedback on the best time for pickups. It will likely be 1 day a week. And when we decide on the date and time, we will be publicizing that through School Messenger. So,
Any questions for Mr. Khan? Thanks, Jay. Tracy Rorick, our Director of Business Student Services, your turn.
I have no report tonight.
Oh, I thought I said you did. Okay. And then there's no president's report and maybe a superintendent's report?
Yes, really quick. We are excited to announce that we are currently working with the Mobile Care Chicago to provide on-site dental support for families who are having trouble scheduling appointments for regular dental care. Mobile Care Chicago is a non-for-profit organization that offers dental, asthma, physicals, and immunization services to children ages 6 months to 18 years old. It's a free service, whether the child is insured or not. The only insurance that they do bill is Medicaid. So on June 2nd and 3rd, the van will come to our district, elementary on the 2nd, middle school on the 3rd, and appointments will be available from 8:30 to 3. All parents need to do is sign the consent form that we will send home and let our nurses know when you would like an appointment. Children who are still remote may attend either day. This should help support especially the grades that need updated dental forms for next year, which are incoming kindergarten, 2nd, and 6th graders will need updated dental forms, or for anyone new to the district. The van has updated safety features and can provide free cleanings, fillings, and follow-up care that fulfills the paperwork requirements that we have in our district. We will also be working with them again in the fall to support physicals and immunizations. Those forms are needed for pre-K, K, and 6, and anyone new to the district in the fall. So I want to thank our nurses, Kelly Doro, Kathy Sullivan, Jen Murray, who've been helping to organize this, Mobile Care Chicago, and Victoria Alcantara for supporting us in these efforts.
That's wonderful. I'm sure you're going to be pushing out more notifications.
Yes, the school messenger will be going out in the next couple of days.
That's fantastic.
Great.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our discussion items. This is my COVID legacy. I didn't used to have to do this before COVID. So our first discussion item is a policy manual customization project. Dr. Leali is going to outline the policies that we have updated, and we will ask the board to approve the first read of the policy manual. We'll bring it back in June for a second read, final approval, and Dr. Leali will be asking the board to specifically discuss policies 4150 and 6:330. But before she dives in, I just want to thank all policy. It's already getting fogged up. All the policy team members, past and present, because the new guys met with the old guys to try to put the final wrap up on this. And I appreciate everybody's long hours because I noticed this printed out. This is it, right?
That's it.
This is a huge project.
That's back to back.
Hundreds and hundreds of pages of
Yeah.
policies. So thank you. I appreciate all your work.
Agreed.
So
Yeah.
now I hand it over to you.
Thank you. So yes, the subcommittee of the previous board met multiple times this year. We brought our new board members in. Our new subcommittee met last week, and then we brought our Julie Gatchell and Leanne Charlot came and joined us as well. So we had that group meet together. The draft policy manual has now been reviewed by Illinois Association of School Boards multiple times and by our attorneys, 2 different firms in some cases. Substantially, there's not many changes of note unless we changed our wording to be compliant with the law. So, but really most of the policies we adopted Press's recommendations, which is from our organization.
Hey, could you tell what press is?
So Press is the service, yes, that IASB provides to us when when the law changes or we need to change what we're doing in order to be compliant with legal requirements, the IASB has a service where they will draft a policy for us to think about, and then we can adapt it or change it a little bit if we want to. But that is the organization that helped us update our entire policy manual. And so again, we've been working on it since January. So we retained wording specific to Lake Bluff District 65 when we felt it was necessary. So if there was a big discussion and the wording was specific just to things that we do in our district, for example, we really felt it was important to retain wording around Boat Lake Bluff when we talk about school board members coming onto the board. Those types of things we left in policy. We did approve a more detailed and specific acceptable use of technology policy based on recent events. That is 5:125. So you might want to take a look at that between now and next week. And we are basically presenting the entire draft manual tonight with one outstanding question for the larger board to consider. And that's the two policies that Mark just talked about. Policy 4:150, which addresses facilities, and policy 6:330, which addresses awards and scholarships. And they're sort of unrelated because they deal with two different things, but the issue that we're bringing to the board is related in the sense that policy 4:150 does not right now have any language addressing a process for naming a facility or part of a facility or any item on campus after a particular individual. Policy 6:330 has language in it prohibiting the naming of awards or scholarships after an individual. And we felt that it might be good to be consistent with the language of both of those policies, considering that they both address honoring someone, an individual, with naming in some way, either a facility, an item on campus like a bench, or an award or a scholarship. So the subcommittee initially addressed that in policy 4:150 by just removing the language and thinking that future boards would be able to address that in the way that they felt they wanted to if somebody brought something like that to their attention. So they felt like just removing it but not prohibiting it would be okay. But this previous board had already prohibited naming on awards and scholarships. And so again, that's sort of a note to the next board or any board that deals with that question to say, we really don't think that that's appropriate. But we thought it might be good to be consistent, either leaving language out and allowing future boards to make that decision should it come to their discussion table, or to go ahead and prohibit it as a message from this board that moving forward, we don't think that it's something we would like to do. And then of course, a future board could take that back to their policy committee and change it, but it definitely would, signal a conversation was necessary. So the subcommittee did not feel like we could really do this one without a larger board conversation. And so that's what I bring to you tonight.
So just as I think as history, the reason that they changed the old policy to not allow scholarships and things like that to be named after individuals was because of, without getting into the very specific details, kind of a bad experience with the prior individual. It happens in society all the time. If you name something after somebody before they pass away and you don't know what's going on. I used to live in Cincinnati and they named Pete Rose Way long before Pete Rose got in trouble for gambling, and so you're still a lot of examples of that. So that's what happened there. And I think the big question, the question to start with before you dive into the details might be something as big as, does the board think that these two policies should be consistent in the naming issue overall? And then you dive into which way do we go on the naming? So do we think we should be consistent between the two policies?
That's
I
a
would
good
definitely
question.
sense there should be some consistency between the two, whether it's a facility or an award or achievement or scholarship, whatever. It seems to me that the rationale for one would transfer to the other.
What do you guys think?
I think I'm probably in agreement with that. I don't have a strong opinion on it, as I think it's easier to change an award than it is a building, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really see any reason not to be consistent. So yes, I would be in agreement of being consistent.
That makes sense to me as well. The one thing I have a little issue with is I think there should be something, whichever way we decide to go, I think something should be put in the policy about about naming facilities, whether it's we don't do it, or we don't allow it, or we do allow it, we should describe what the procedure for that is. I don't think we should just leave it blank.
Anybody else want to?
So I had thought that it's an interesting point. And I understand what you're saying, right? Is that we want to give some guidance, right? I had previously made the argument when we were having this in committee and we couldn't quite decide, which is why we brought it here tonight, that we should leave it blank because I didn't want to necessarily set this precedent that you can never name something after a person, right? It is certainly something that needs to be vetted, needs to be well thought out, needs to be really considered, and can be a tricky thing. And I recognize all of those things, but I didn't necessarily want to prohibit it. Kind of wanted to leave it to the wisdom of future boards if they felt that that was necessary.
So before we dive into that one, can I say that I don't think I've heard from Carrie specifically, but so far I'm hearing people think that there should be consistency between the two. I see a head nod.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what, for the most part, decisions for one should be similar to decisions for the other. There may be some exceptions, but whether to name or overall name or not. Okay. And then the details of which, whether or not it makes sense or not. I think your argument, it's hard to foresee the future, right? Like, how do you know what's going to happen tomorrow, 10 years from now, 5 years from now? I don't know. I don't know how to put a blanket statement down that's going to apply in perpetuity.
I can tell you that in the language that was taken out of the section 4 policy did outline a procedure for anyone who wanted to go ahead and propose a naming situation for the facility, that the board would appoint a subcommittee and that subcommittee would then make a recommendation. So that similar language could be adopted for both.
So that was taken out of
That was the
building
language
one?
that was taken out of the section 4 policy.
How long ago was that taken out?
That's what we decided in our previous subcommittee was to
Oh.
just leave that blank because
For-
we felt like we had the discussion of whether or not we wanted to prohibit it. We felt like, no, we didn't want to prohibit it. We just wanted to leave it blank. And then when we came back to read both policies, it felt inconsistent to have one prohibited and one outlining a process. So if we want it, all I'm suggesting is we want to be consistent with the process. We could utilize that language in both policies to outline that there be a process.
So you kind of
or
get the
we
best
could
of both
take it
worlds
out.
there a little bit.
Mhm.
You can dictate a process, sort of, because that, again, you can make the same argument on the process that the process may not apply 10 years from now either.
Mhm.
Who knows, I mean, the way the world changes, but then we need another committee.
No. Well, we're keeping our policy committee intact, so we'll just call them up and have another quick meeting.
So policy would also be on the building naming and scholarship naming committee under that theory? or
Oh,
would
you
that
mean
be-
an additional committee if somebody asks? Yeah, we would need a little subcommittee to work through it.
Naming committee or something?
Mhm.
And we'd have to set a process of what.
Right.
Would
At
have
least
to
the
happen.
generalized outline.
These are the steps that would have to be taken.
Answers, questions that need to be a minimum.
Mhm.
That's what concerned me about just leaving it blank. Like, what would stop a future board or anybody from just saying, hey, you know what, we're gonna name the school after so-and-so, they're retiring, they were great, let's just do this. There's no policies saying what we have to do or we can't do that. And not saying that that could easily happen, but that's just.
So there should be criteria perhaps.
A vetting process.
Vetting
And are we
process.
lumping everything in as building, scholarship, trees, benches? Or is it,
No, it's hard, right? Because a building is not a removable object. And so I think you would have to be more, I mean, you should be careful in all of it, right? Who you want representing your district, but you definitely would need to be more careful in naming, LBMS now becomes the Mark Berry Building
Oh,
or
God.
something, right? You can't remove the building. You can remove a bench later if Mark Berry falls from grace,
Oh,
right?
we can take-
So.
Take Mark's name off.
I don't like being in this
Or-
example.
right.
In my opinion, I think, and this is getting into the second part of it, is that I don't disagree that there should be a vetting process, but I also think we should leave it open that it's a possibility that we can name things after people and places and whatnot, just because I don't think, even though we've had a couple of bad seeds come through, that the majority of the people we want to honor would most likely hold their name in good light for the rest of their lifetime. And you could have a donor come through that wants to donate and say, you know, that's how the hospitals are built. It's like, here's your money
The
and.
Nike Memorial Middle School, brand new. You know,
That's good.
AbbVie did that up in North Chicago. I don't know how they named that building, but if they
But
decided.
it
to name
happens, and so I would hate to have to say, oh, no, sorry. We've prohibited it all.
So I'm seeing heads. Lauren, are you on the same page as Carrie?
Yeah, I think it's important not to close the book on it, but I think there needs to be a strict,
Structure or a
Structure
vetting
to it.
process?
yeah, and maybe it's, buildings have this, scholarships have this, and then they're evaluated every 5 years or, and then trees, benches, that types of things is this.
And there's always going to be something new proposed in the future that we hadn't thought about. that we
Exactly.
Like bricks.
Decide what, bricks.
Yeah.
What do you, so
Well, does anyone feel strongly that we should prohibit the naming of things?
like a blanket prohibit?
Right.
Anybody?
Because that was one of
That
the
was
things
what it
we were
was.
talking about, right?
Yeah, I don't.
No.
So I think we're consistent on that. So not a blanket prohibit. So then we have to have some kind of, either it's a policy committee or a separate committee that we create, the building naming committee that has to get together and propose a process, a vetting process, the steps that, minimum requirements that if it's a person, you got to do this, this, and this. If it's a scholarship, you got to do, I don't know.
It's like a legacy committee or something that, looks
Perhaps.
at.
But the policy committee has to figure out language to put in the policy, or we could put that same language back in, or we could talk to the attorneys.
Yes. So what I'm thinking is what this gives me some good direction. So I can actually take the language that we took out of that policy, draft something for both that seems applicable. And then I like the idea of reevaluating after a certain amount of time. So we'll see what we can draft and then send
mean,
out to the policy subcommittee. Does that sound?
We've, obviously, there are situations where scholarships then aren't necessary. So for that name isn't, something. So yeah, I think something that we reevaluate every, X amount of years.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea to have some kind of reevaluation cycle in it, that we revisit those names just in case perhaps. Is anybody feeling like this is absolutely not something I can stomach?
I thought the paragraph that was taken out, I thought was a good, concise paragraph. It told you a process and what to do, and so I think it would be good to do that.
All right.
I think that's the process. Sounds good then.
You feel good about that?
I do. That gives me good
Gives you
direction.
something to start on?
Yes,
This will
absolutely.
be an iterative thing. I'm sure we'll see it and revise it.
Yes, because what we'll do is draft it. We'll send it to the policy subcommittee. We'll take a look at it. And then we'll include it in our next draft, the second draft, which we'll send out to you before we have our next discussion and possibly approval at the next meeting. Otherwise, we can do it in June.
Okay.
Before I do leave this agenda item, I just want to thank not only IASB, Ken Carter's been working with us, but the bulk of the work on this project is Shelley Goff, and she's been doing an amazing job keeping us on track and on target with this 4,000-page document that we've been dealing with.
Shelley, we
So,
appreciate
Thank you,
thank
Shelley.
you.
keep us all aligned, not just on that, but on a lot of things. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to move on.
Yes.
All right, so return to learn, back to Dr. Lealy and an update on that.
Okay, another short update this week, and then I would like to bring a bigger update, kind of outlining how we felt we ended the year last year, and then some proposals for next year. We're getting more clarity from the state, which is good. We resolved last week that the only students that will be eligible for remote learning next year will be those who are ineligible for vaccination, which means students under 12, and those who are quarantined due to close contacts. And students would have to meet both of those criteria to be eligible for remote learning. At this point, that means there would be no students at middle school eligible for remote learning. And I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume, but I'm thinking that the close contact guidance is going to be adjusted before next year for students who are
Can
vaccinated.
you say again the two criteria?
So they would have to be ineligible for a vaccination, which means students under 12, and quarantined due to close contact.
Although some of those middle schoolers could be 11 years old still when they
Unless they're,
start. Yeah.
yes, potentially.
Is that the only ineligibility, or is there like religious reasons and?
So at this point, there are no other eligibility criteria, not even a medically fragile person in the home. They're right now talking about the medical eligibility kind of reverting to the homebound instruction, which is already in school code, but is very, very different from what we've been providing remote learning wise. And I just want to say that's the resolution that was passed. We're waiting for more clarification on what that all means. And we know that that's going to evolve.
This is, just to be clear, this is not our criteria. It's
No.
State guidance. right?
Illinois State Board of Education. So we'll continue to follow along in that discussion, what that all means. We're preparing for hybrid options anyway, because we know we're going to have students that will have to quarantine at some point. We will continue to follow masking guidance and distancing guidance as it evolves. Right now, what I'm reading is that we're not looking at a vaccine for students under 12 until the end of this calendar year. So I'm hoping that by after winter break, we'll be in a much better spot. I do want to address the fact that we have been accepted into a pilot for Lake County. The county is working with the CDC to collect data on whether or not students should be quarantined if they are within the 6 feet, between 3 and 6 feet. And so, which is great. So they are working with some districts to not quarantine students that are within 3 to 6 feet. And then they're having some school districts stay as a control group. We are in the control group right now, so we're going to be maintaining the guidance on close contacts. The reason for that is because we do not offer on-site testing right now. And that was a criteria for being able to fit into the test group for the
There are
pilot.
districts doing that?
There are many districts that are doing testing on site. Now, that's something that we might want to consider moving into the fall, but I just want to present that for any thoughts or feelings first, as a first discussion tonight. But essentially, the pros of offering testing on site would be that immediately you would have some kind of an indication of whether or not a close contact was showing up positive, which has been good, I think, for some parents in other districts, been able to kind of get right back to activities, especially if they are negative. Sometimes, though, depending on the test, some confirmatory testing has to be done either right away or in another location, which kind of adds to that work for the family. Cons, we're going to be down to 2 nurses next year. So we're only planning on 1 nurse per building, and doing on-site testing would definitely increase their workload. It would be an additional cost. At this point, it's not fully subsidized for districts in our tier. We're not a tier 1 district that gets additional funding and lots of extra support. So for us, we would need to be paying for it. And it's a little unclear of what we would need to do. So some districts are doing surveillance testing, meaning testing everyone 1 or 2 times a week. Some are just doing it when they're identified as close contacts. I'm not sure exactly what we might be having to do in the fall. But again, something for us to think about.
Is testing at a point now where it's simple enough for us to administer on site? Like, doesn't take a lot of training to interpret?
No,
testing?
they would need to be trained, and nurses would need to be trained, and they would also need to enter the test results into the REDCap system, which is the statewide reporting system for COVID testing. But yes, some of the tests are very easy to administer. There's the SHIELD test, which is the University of Illinois test, the saliva test, and then there's some other quick PCR tests.
So it's not predetermined which version we would use at this point?
No, it would be based on it if we went out and researched and kind of looked at what we wanted to do. But here's one thing I do want to clarify is we could not make it mandatory at this point. So a parent could still refuse to have their child tested at school. So we would have that as a protocol, but parents would need to allow us to do that.
Do you know that if that other districts that are doing testing, is that a problem? Is that a real issue, a real big deal? Like if we suspect it, or if we had the random policy that you mentioned, that people are like opting out from that?
Some people, but I don't think it's a huge problem. I think the districts where it's working, it's been working well. And I've heard from some districts that they feel it's really great because they've been right on it. They can like get back into activities, and it's kind of nice and convenient just to have it at school. For some other districts, depending on the testing, it's been a very big cost for not a lot of return on investment. They're not finding a lot of cases when they're doing surveillance testing, but for the diagnostic piece, when a student is identified, that's been more helpful, I think, for people.
So are we finding families having a hard time going out and getting tested when need be, or?
I have not heard of families having a hard time anymore. There's a lot of tests available now.
Right.
There don't seem to be long lines. We have lots of places that we refer kids to, but principals, are you hearing anything about that? No.
No, I haven't.
It seems very readily available
Yes.
that it might.
Is there cost-effective ways for families who don't have the same means as others to get this done inexpensively?
Yeah, I don't think there's a cost for the
For the
testing.
test, oh,
Yeah,
because I thought if you went to like CVS or something, you got charged. or-
I think
No,
there's
it's
many free
Walgreens, I
testing.
know, does free testing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I know a couple months back at Return to Learn when we were, maybe it was a few months back, actually, I think it was before we went into phase 2. We had talked about this a little bit. And I think one of the reasons that, I think it was you that said it, but maybe it was somebody else that decided not to do it, is because we couldn't accept a negative test to get somebody back in school. Would that still be the case?
So there would have to be kind of different protocols if we were doing surveillance or diagnostic. And then the rules on that would depend on what the exact test was that we were administering.
Okay.
So there are some tests that we can accept. And there are some tests that aren't really acceptable from Lake County Health. So, and then there's also different protocols, like I said, depending if it's a surveillance test and it comes back positive, they typically want to do another test right away to make sure it's positive, because you wouldn't get 2 false positives right in a row.
Right.
But usually the negative test could be accepted.
So if we're doing this, we're also following Wake County Health Department guidance
Yes,
on
they
how to do
would,
it?
they would support us with the guidance as well.
I would see that as being one benefit if we could accept, so the student didn't have to quarantine for 7 or 10 or 14 or whatever days and be back in the building. if they quarantined.
Or even go home, right? Like if a
Right.
student was symptomatic and they got a test at the nurse and it was negative, could they go back to class?
It depends, because we still are going to exclude students with symptoms, depending on the symptom. If a student, here's the thing that's going to be hard for us to get back to. We do want students who are sick to stay home. Like we want to get back to the system where if you're sick enough to take a sick day, we want you to stay home and be sick and not worry about logging on to remote learning and things like that. So we're still working through. There's going to be some COVID symptoms. And then if the student just has a runny nose and we do a test, they might be able to come back. But if there's other symptoms, we might not be able to do that. A lot of this is on a case-by-case basis right now. It's still evolving. Just bring it to your attention as something that we may have to talk about. I don't know how this pilot's going to go. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move to a quarantine situation only when students have been within 3 feet. I do want to mention though, that only includes classroom settings. That does not include the bus. It does not include lunch, and it doesn't include playground, because those are sometimes situations where kids are within 3 feet or have their masks off. And so that will remain, if a student is positive in one of those environments, anyone within 6 feet would still be quarantined regardless at this point. So a thing to put on our radar, we can continue to talk at Return to Learn, and I'll continue to keep you updated on how this pilot is going and continue to gather feedback as we move through the summer. The other piece that I just want to report tonight is we are planning on adjusting our self-certification process beginning in the summer. We will just be asking that if parents send their children to school, that is their self-certification. We will send a reminder of the symptoms that we need you to look for, maybe once a week, and just keep looking for these symptoms. Don't send them if you have them, but we will eliminate the form and the calls.
Hopefully that will not change the outcomes very much.
Well, we'll still send them home if we find the symptoms, so yes. But hopefully it's one less piece for parents.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Leali?
We'll bring that testing conversation back.
Yeah,
as we
that's
need to.
interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, the pros and cons of it, but then also can we talk about the cost of it?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, I'm sure there's different versions of cost too, depending on what direction you want to go and the cost benefit, like how much is it worth it? Okay, so now we're going to continue with Dr. Leali and Mr. Blackmer talking about field trips for the 21-22 school year. This has
Yes.
historically been something we talk about every year. And the board has always, and administration, at least at some level, has always been a little concerned about it. I'm hearing growing concerns over the years with some of the big field trips that we do, mostly from a liability kind of thinking perspective. And I'm curious to see how this is evolving.
So, yes, thank you. And first want to just say that for the daytime field trips, we are excited to say we're going to be working on scheduling those pending availability of the venue and whatever COVID restrictions, but the regular field trips that are not overnight are in the works, and we're starting to consider how to plan for those for next year. So that's great. This conversation really has to do with overnight trips. As you may or may not know, sixth graders typically attend a trip overnight to Springfield. Seventh graders have some overnight outdoor education experiences, and then our eighth graders typically attend a trip to Washington, DC.
The only correction I might make to that, and I'm sorry, Lisa, the sixth grade Springfield trip has in recent years, the last 3 been a day trip, not an overnight component.
Okay, thank
But
you.
still more than 100 miles away, so requiring board approval.
Yes. So just here tonight to talk through some of the pros and cons of these longer, either overnight or long distance trips. The pros to these are obvious. Kids love being on a trip with each other. It's exciting. We have curricular tie-ins to Springfield and Washington, DC, obviously, and the outdoor education trips typically build teams. Kids get to know each other better. Lots of fun socializing that happens. But as Mark alluded to, the downsides of these trips are increasing, unfortunately. So some of them that we are concerned about, adult supervision of students overnight presents potential liability exposure for different reasons. We have experienced some issues with assigning roommates when students have personal issues that they're dealing with. There is a financial impact to families that can be difficult. We do pay for students who qualify for free lunches, but sometimes when a family doesn't qualify or is just over that line, then the cost of the trip is a hardship, and they might not be able to do it, but then they don't qualify for our assistance either. And some of the families that qualify don't really want to accept that amount of assistance either. And so it kind of creates this difficulty for the students. Definitely the long distance can make it difficult if a student or staff member gets sick or injured and needs to get home quickly. And finally, obviously for this upcoming year, security concerns or COVID related concerns could be an issue or something that we might want to talk about. So in the past, we have issued a survey for middle school parents, and there was overwhelming support for these trips. We don't really anticipate that we would get much of a different response this year. I think kids and parents really feel like these are cornerstone experiences that kids look forward to for a long time. But many other districts have shifted away from this being school experiences and more towards a parent-sponsored event or trip, which has some downsides also, because then at that point, we would no longer be able to pay for any families to attend the experience if it is no longer sponsored by the school. And that can result in some equity issues for trips that cost this much. Some of them have just shifted, like the outdoor education, to more of a day trip, and done a few different trips during the year that are more during the day. Again, this is a first conversation for next year. We'll bring it back next time for the board to approve the trips for this coming year. But just want to make sure I presented a good scope of kind of some of the thoughts that we have as an administrative team. Nate, did you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I mean, I think that it's we're fortunate to continue to have staff members that are willing to commit their own personal time to make these trips happen. But you definitely summarized some of the greatest concerns that we have, just as far as making it an equitable experience to the best of our ability, but also recognizing there are families who are just uncomfortable sending their kids on a school trip that is overnight. And so we're finding ourselves more and more doing almost dual programming. We're taking the group of kids that are able to and want to go, and then trying to create sort of a parallel experience for kids who are staying here in Lake Bluff. So that's just an added layer that I think is more prevalent in the last 5 to 6 years.
So I really appreciate the the context there. That was great. As a parent of an incoming sixth grader, and I've heard about these trips and working with teens in the past. I don't think in my time on the board I've actually seen a survey on this, and I could be wrong. I could have missed it, or it could just be because of COVID and whatnot. We haven't done one. I would be really interested in knowing if that data, what the data is, like if it's changed, if COVID has changed that, if people have different opinions because of finances or otherwise, and maybe we could ask some questions about that. I don't know. I just think I know I would not be ready to help, think about this in any way without knowing what parents actually thought was important. So that would help me. Like, I don't know if anybody else.
I think I agree with that. Because I think COVID may have changed people's perspective on this.
I think it's fine to ask. I do agree that I think we'll still have overwhelming support, parents wanting these programs. It is something that, you know, is special about our middle school, and people really look forward to it and value it. Nate, can I ask you, this dual programming, is it something you always did for kids that stayed back, or is it becoming, I guess, do we have the staffing and the ability to pull it off well?
We're a little thinner than we once were, for sure. Where we used to maybe have for a DC trip 10 or less kids that would stay behind. Of those, you might have 5 or 6 that were staying behind because of some family plans, a sports tournament or something else. So they wouldn't actually be with us for that day of school that we would be gone anyway. And then you'd be left with 3 or 4 kids that we would do something unique and special for. That number's grown. We're typically closer to 15, maybe 20 kids not going more recently. And it's for any variety of reasons, just as Dr. Leali had expressed. Some families not interested in accepting financial assistance. Some just not feeling comfortable putting their kids on a plane and sending them to DC. So the desire to have quality programming for those kids not participating has grown is the best way for me to summarize that.
And Nate, we've talked to, when we do have adult chaperones on those trips, then we're a little leaner in the adult supervision department for the rest of the building sometimes as well.
Yeah, for each of the grade level trips, the majority of staff members that are chaperoning are grade level teachers. We obviously have also fine arts teachers that get involved, and then we're having to find coverage for them when they've left the building for their other grade levels. And then sometimes we still need more chaperones, and that may be tapping into grade levels that then require subs and coverage while they're gone.
To add on to what was said a moment ago, I've also over the years heard about how special this is to families in North Bluff. I've heard people over the years say that's when it came down to choices between where they moved. This was cited to me a number of times as like a tilting decision-making factor, because a lot of other districts have just gotten away from it. And
That's true.
it's pretty unique. So I'm going to consider.
Would the board like me to do another survey?
I like the idea.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I'd be interested
fine.
too to hear the administration's choices too, like the teachers, if they're still on board, and
sure,
because I would
yeah.
want enthusiastic on both sides.
And just so you know, Andy, I did a quick search here. The survey that was last administered was specific to the 8th grade Washington, DC trip, and that was administered in 2017.
Okay,
Oh, so it has been a while.
cool. Thanks. Nate.
Is it for the survey? Are you thinking middle school, or can we include 5th grade for Atwood?
Probably 5th grade up, don't you think?
I mean, I think
Yeah.
it would be good information to have, to kind of lump them all together.
That makes sense.
And if I could give 2 cents to say, as if there was an option to have parents volunteer, would anybody be interested in doing that? Because I do think if it's thin on one side or the other, the people staying home, there would be a good collaboration with some parent groups that they could probably support that. Instead of financing a major trip, we can
Volunteer to be chaperones.
volunteer to be chaperones and then volunteer to create a similar experience at home.
I wonder if Mr. Blackmer or Miss Bay could comment on that particular thing, because we've never done parent chaperones as long as I've been here, I don't think. And I wonder if that was a deliberate thing because of all the things we always have to be so careful about.
A couple of things come to mind. On a trip like this, there's a lot of sort of confidential information that our chaperones have to be made privy to. Medication distribution, just certain elements that I think would have to be addressed. I love when parents are involved in school. I think there are varying degrees of comfort that parents have in terms of engaging with kids when it comes to redirection or just sort of the management of behavior when it comes to a trip of this nature. They're certainly comfortable engaging with their own child and having high expectations, but it can be a little more difficult to redirect and address some of the more challenging situations that can arise on a trip like this. So it's not to say that it can't be done. They just don't have the advantage of knowing the kids and necessarily having the established relationship and being able to call them all by name. So that's something that I think is considerably different than a teacher who would be going on the trip.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, oh, sorry, Kelly, do you want to go ahead?
That's okay. I was just going to acknowledge and lean on Nate's experience in this area. Certainly is something he's been doing for quite some time, and he's been on many overnight trips. But I would just acknowledge, there is an element of team building, community building that could be neat for parents to experience. At the same time, I do think that the innovative ideas that we have had parents support in the past, in terms of like those that are staying back, or for Atwood, half the class goes, or 2 classes go at the beginning of the week, 2 classes go at the end of the week. There's something to be said perhaps about considering how parents could support here in the school during those times. I think that could really be beneficial.
I think finding a way, I get what you're saying for parent involvement, but to think of parents on the trips, I think maybe use those parents at the school setting,
Instead.
and then more focused, or more teachers or more hands on deck can go to the actual trip. I think of like Time Traveler or something like that, where it's like a unique experience that we do for that grade. Maybe it's something PTO would partner up with and help create a program that's something.
That's basically what
comparable.
7th grade, what the 7th grade trip is right now, right? Don't half stay back and do like a history of Lake Bluff and the other half go to the outdoor ed. So building on that idea, maybe.
Yeah.
But even financially, if we can't afford to send everybody, there could be options for home.
Can I add one more thing as well? I agree, Lauren, with you. I also think, and maybe Nate, I don't know your thoughts about this, but as someone who's gone out and spent time at Atwood when the students are there, there's something to be said for the independence that students feel when they're away from home and away from their families. That's very different than when their parents might be around. And so I do think that that's something to consider, that for some students, this is their first time away from home without their families there, and they have to kind of figure out what that's like for themselves. So just wanted to put that out there.
Good point, Tracy. Thank you.
And there would be an additional layer of checking that we would need to do with anyone that's not employed with the school district in terms of background, fingerprinting, et cetera, because.
Well, and parents
obviously-
aren't trained.
Yeah.
I mean, you honestly, you just don't know what you're gonna get.
Yeah.
So,
And it's not the daytime part, it's sort of the
right.
Yes.
large
the nighttime.
school-sponsored sleepover part of it.
Yeah.
It'd be difficult to
And it
manage.
just,
Yeah.
it may not be directly applicable, but there was a time in this district when we used to hire substitute teachers who lived in the community. And we stopped doing that because despite the confidentiality requirements, they had trouble adhering to that. And they would go through the files of other students and do things and spread word that they shouldn't have done. And so despite best intentions, things don't always end up the way you want. So you got to take precautions.
So I am we'll design a survey. We'll include 4th to 7th graders, just to get an idea for next year, and then we'll bring it back
Great.
in a future meeting. I'm not sure we'll have results by our next meeting, but we'll bring it back when we can.
Any final thoughts on that one? Trips? Great. All right, so back to the glasses. Item D under discussions is the Illinois Association of School Boards Joint Annual Conference. We're going to have a discussion on which members may or may not want to attend the conference this year. It's in November, the weekend before Thanksgiving. Registration opens on June 8th, and we need to make reservations at that day or very soon after, because the hotels in the area of the event fill up really quickly. I don't know, did you plan to lead it, or you just wanted?
No, we talked about this one. Yeah, we
can.
can tag team or anyone that's been there. Yeah.
It's
go ahead.
it's the weekend before Thanksgiving. I forget the exact date, but it's usually for school board members. It might be Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's some things Sunday morning. Administrators often have Thursday events as well, but typically it's Friday, Saturday night. In the past, people and the items on the seminars for school board members on Fridays are a little different. You sign up for those and you pay for those. They're usually specialty things, more in depth. Sometimes they cover some of the training you need to, you're either required to get or you think makes a lot of sense to get. There's some stuff that isn't required, but it's really pretty handy to go through. I've been to 5 or 6 or 7 of them. They're very, very useful. In fact, the thing that I've shared a million times, the most useful thing about going to the conference is not the classrooms itself. It's the conversations you have between the classrooms in the hallway, having a coffee. They usually feed you breakfast. The Friday seminars give you lunch. The people you meet from other districts and you learn the stuff they're going through and how they solve their problems and the issues they're dealing with. It's revealing and eye-opening like you would not imagine. And you learn and you get to check off boxes on things you need to accomplish through your either required training or training that makes a lot of sense. So it can be a lot of fun. The evenings are usually, there's sponsored events by the different vendors that they host parties, and there's fireworks in the Chicago River on that Saturday night, I think it is.
Saturday.
And several of the hotels have bars that overlook the river with perfect views of the fireworks. And some of the vendors have their little shindigs at places that have views of the fireworks. And there's often food and beverages being shared and a lot of networking. Great time to meet colleagues. In the past, we've also had lunches and dinners and drinks with board members from 67 and 115. So kind of a good way to kind of get to know people a little bit who you might not otherwise know. There's a lot of positives to it. It's
Yeah. and it's
highly valuable experience I've found.
Great keynote speakers, typically. It's put on by the school business
Yeah,
officials
they make a big deal out of the
organization.
keynote speakers. They hire usually some big names. They've had some good speakers over the years.
Yep, and my first experience with Lake Bluff, I was able to see Jay and Kevin present at the III conference in 2019, before they even knew I was in the audience. I was
Jay was a
looking at
legend
them.
after that. That was kind of scary.
So,
The name got out on Jay Cobb.
so it's good information, and we just want to go ahead and register early if you'd like to join us, so that we can get a hotel close to the action. So if you can let Shelley know as soon as
It's right on
possible.
the, if you know the area, what is it? What do they call it?
It's Hyatt Sheridan.
Right on the river. It's a
Radisson.
nice part of town. The hotels are pretty nice in that area. You can invite your spouse or significant other that evening for the evenings you're there, and they can go spend your money the rest of the day when you're in class or whatever.
And what were the dates?
The 19th through the 21st.
And how many people do we typically send?
It's ranged from 0 to 5, but it could be everybody.
It could be everybody.
I will say I went, must have been 2019.
Yeah, 2 years, the last one, because I
Yeah,
remember
the last time it was one, and I did find it really valuable and helpful and a lot of really good information.
that was the last live one, I think.
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
We went to, I remember, and that's one where you went to the onboarding a new superintendent.
Exactly,
Seminar.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Go, we
list
better
of
learn how to
things
do
you can
this.
attend is really broad. And you don't have to, the day on Saturday, you don't have to sign up in advance.
No, there's lots. of
You can
different
go
sessions.
to, you can sign up, I think you have like 5 time slots during the day. And if you go to one and it's like, oh, this is boring, but there's a cool one down the hall not too far, you can leave and run in and go to the next one. People, it just happens all day long. So yeah, it's worth it. Any other questions on that? Thoughts on that? And you guys can arrange something fun. I know you have, I can see that twinkle in your eye right there.
Lauren's
We're gonna
doing
make it
t-shirts.
t-shirts,
T-shirts as we speak.
Matching
I'm getting a sense for what happens down this side of the road. And I like it. All right, so are we done with that one?
Yeah.
So item E under discussions has to do with legal representation for school districts.
Okay.
And Dr. Leali will give us some update and background on that.
Thank you. So currently in the district, we utilize HLERC, Hodges, Louisi, Eisenhammer, Rodick, and Cone for personnel contracts, FOIA, policy, lots of issues. We currently also work with Engler, Callaway, Baston, and Sraga, ECBS for our special education needs, and Kleinthorpe and Jenkins for our tax appeals and objections. I am bringing to the board a proposal that we retain HLERC for personnel work. And specifically with regard to some individual issues that we've had in the last couple of years. But I would like to engage with a new firm for the next year just to see how they work out, Korea Bocheck, It's a newer firm. They have a great reputation in the area. They are not asking for a retainer, but just an engagement letter authorizing the board, authorizing me to start working with them and see how that relationship goes. Again, there's districts handle this in different ways. Currently, we work with multiple firms. Some districts work with one and just multiple people in the firm that have different specialties. We've had really great experiences with all of our firms, but I think moving into contract negotiations with a very newer administrative team and kind of new board, and it would be nice to kind of go with a firm that's been doing a lot of work in this area and kind of is staying really current and involved in education policy. I think that would be great for us. Typically, board members don't work directly too often with the attorneys, but the boards do work on your behalf. The administrators consult with the attorneys, but again, they're your board attorneys. And so
I think that's embedded in school code,
Yes.
that they are our attorney technically.
So the ways that you would work directly with the board would be if you have an issue with your employee, which would be me, or contract negotiations. And so again, I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the firms that we're working with. And there's a few different ways that we could go about doing this. I provided information on Kriya Bochek in the packet for you to review. They would certainly be willing to come to a meeting. We could also open it up to multiple firms for you to kind of do more for multiple firms to present and for you to have an idea of what's out there.
We did that before, because early on in Lisa's predecessor's career, like Jean Sophie, she was familiar with Hodges Louisi from her prior experience, and she wanted the board to make the decision, but she brought in Hodges and 3 other firms. So we actually had a closed session, I believe it was, where we sat through presentations by 4 law firms. And at the end of the night, we voted for Hodges anyways, but we didn't engage in a retainer agreement, which is where they do everything and you pay a lump sum every year, no matter what. But we used them for the majority of our work anyways. And eventually they discovered some other firms that had more specialty niches that worked really well for them. But that's the way it was done 9 years ago or something like that. I think my sense is that more and more districts are cherry picking the firms they use for specialty issues, because it seems like there are some real specialty people out there that get a really good reputation. Like Terry Engler is a great example.
Yeah.
A special ed lawyer who's really well known and used all over the place. They used her at NSSED at the special ed co-op that I'm on their board. But so there's a lot of different ways to do it. To you guys, and what you thinking?
So my question is, this is very common to switch things up and or always bring in somebody different, like on a yearly basis, or?
No, we've had these firms for a few years.
Okay.
And, you know, Mark had asked me when I came into the district, do we want to look? Because we have been using the same firm for a long time. And I did not feel comfortable being new to the district, not really having any experience with any of the firms actually. And I feel like now that I've had some experience and I've worked on some issues with some of the firms that we deal with, I feel more comfortable expanding a little bit and getting some different opinions on some of the things that we've been working with. But no, this wouldn't have to be a yearly thing.
Okay.
But I do like the idea of not paying a retainer. It's just a fee for service and I wouldn't have to use them. I could use them and somebody else for the same issue. Especially, you know, Tracy and I have talked often about Engler's a great firm. Kriya Bochek is a great firm for special ed as well. So sometimes on a tougher case, it's just nice to have 2 opinions and then we can decide how we want to move forward.
I remember when we were going through some of that lawsuit negotiation a few years ago. Jay can chime in if it's relevant. We had sort of looked at it with 2020 hindsight and said that might have been a good year to have a retainer agreement,
Right.
because we were spending a lot of money on legal. But I think that for the most part, that was an outlier year. Although I would bet if you took that year out, our spending on legal doesn't go down year to year. It's just it's a more complicated world we live in, and it's wise for our administrators to consult with wise lawyers pretty regularly.
So I guess the question would be, 1, would we like to do a bigger process where you would see more people as a board? Or are you comfortable authorizing me to engage with this firm, see how it goes? If it doesn't go well, then we might be back next year saying, I'd really like to open it up and just bring in some people and have us make a decision. That would be one way to go, or we could open it up now to some firms that the administrative team feels comfortable with, or open it up entirely and kind of let any firm come in and let us know what they could do.
I think I feel okay engaging with this new firm. We're not signing a retainer agreement with them. Give them a try. We still have our relationships with our other firms as well,
Mhm.
right? So I feel comfortable.
And is there any commitment? Obviously not. Okay, so no commitment of an X amount of business.
We do have to sign some documents.
It's an engagement, yeah, it's an engagement letter that the board president would sign on behalf of the board, authorizing us to engage with that firm, but we wouldn't have to.
I would agree with Ann. I mean, I think if it's someone you're comfortable with and you've vetted them and there's no retainer agreement, then I don't see any reason not to explore that. Seems like a lot of extra work for us to.
Possibly end up at the same.
Right,
solution,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes sense to give them a try. And worst case, we are back here next year if it didn't work out, and then we could always open it up. But I think we could find out more by working with them than just through an interview process.
I definitely do not think we should open up to anybody like invite. That would be a nightmare to have, a ton of people. And one of the things that happens when you get these presentations is you get the rainmakers come and present to you, the people who are used to presenting and selling it, and that may not be who you end up with day to day, so.
And I like on the references, they're a local area. I mean, there's districts in the area. We're a unique,
And
town.
Sarah Bocek, the founder of that firm, used to work for IASA,
Oh.
right? Illinois Association of
Yes.
School Administrators. And so prior to Lisa's contract, when Jean was Dr. Sophie, the former suit, was doing her negotiations, she would go to Sarah Bocek because she was the IASA lawyer for all their
For the superintendent.
superintendents,
Mhm.
and we would work with her there. And so she was always very reasonable and
And they have some great people who've worked a lot with current issues that we're dealing with right now and can support us with that work, so.
So if there's other firms that you have heard things about that you haven't worked with, it might be interesting to learn more about them but I would think that it's probably wise for you to lead that, because we don't know these people from hole in the wall. You will have the opportunities to have intelligent discussions with them, so.
Yes.
Or you and your team.
And we continue to take advantage of free webinars from lots of law firms will offer free webinars. So we go to those when we can, just to
I get
kind of get that
things in
experience.
email from
Yeah.
them all the time, and I've actually attended a couple of them just to.
Yep.
All right, so we done with that one? Any
Yep.
other questions on that, on the legal stuff? All right, so we are going to review the board self-evaluation. So last Wednesday, this is kind of good practice for the board to talk a little bit about things they've done in closed session, especially a board self-evaluation, which is a little vague to the community. It's not a very specific thing that they may or may not be aware of. But periodically, boards do self-evaluations in closed session. It's one of 13 exceptions that we are allowed to, under the Open Meetings Act, that we're allowed to go into closed session for, as long as we have a representative from the Illinois Association of School Boards monitoring, overseeing it or working with us. And we had that last Wednesday. It's a good thing for boards in transition to do, for new boards to do, and boards often do it either every year or every other year as just to kind of review practice and performance and have a real open, honest conversations with one another. And so we did that last Wednesday. We worked with our IASB rep, and we talked, excuse me, sorry. It's my glasses fogged up. We talked about, we did what's called a legacy activity. We did consideration of what's known as the founding principles of effective governance. We reviewed board protocols. We talked about next steps, and then we kind of followed the lead of those conversations to take deeper dives into things board members wanted to talk about and where we needed to develop ourselves more. And so, like, for example, we did this legacy statement where we just kind of brainstormed our own thoughts for what we thought the new boards, we're calling this a new board, we have 4 new members, legacy should be, and put it all on board, and then we kind of talked about it. And a couple of the things that came up in that legacy statement were things, just statements like making a positive change, recommitting to excellence for every student, facilitating difficult conversations and working around equity and systemic barriers to student success, help making District 65 a place where all kids thrive, making a positive impact, always trying to do the right thing, order and peace within our community. And then we had a conversation on what that meant to each of us and where we saw alignment between the board, and felt pretty good about it. Like there seemed to be some alignment. Another example of conversations had to do, I think, with the consideration of the foundation, what's called the foundational principles of effective governance. And so the Illinois Association of School Boards put together lots of reference guidance documents that if you're ever on a school board, you will get bombarded by these things. Every time you go to a seminar, you'll get a whole packet, a whole folder filled of the foundational principles and all these standard documents that are, they're really trying to make a point. There's some value in these. They've thought about it a lot. And the closer you stick to the basics of them, the smoother things tend to work out over time. It's been my experience. And so one of the things we talked about was what were we doing well? What were we not doing well relative to those foundational principles? And one of the things that came up that we talked about had a lot to do with communication with the community, and not so much outgoing communication. There are ways to improve that as well, which I'll talk about some of the follow-ups, but also inbound conversation. And so an example of that is over the years, we had changed the number of opportunities in board meetings for input from the community, from just once at the beginning of the meeting to at the beginning of the meeting at the end, and occasionally in the middle when we had something controversial going on. Another example was, let's see, I'm losing my train of thought, sorry. Well, an example of something we had toyed around with is there a way to rethink the way we do a committee of the whole, for example, which we often don't get a lot of two-way conversation other than the community input, is maybe we do something like starting a committee of the whole with a public
Like
town hall kind of meeting. So there's a number of issues that are worth talking about more to develop more regular, more consistent inbound feedback from the community. I think we need to brainstorm that more and think about more ideas. The idea of thinking about our strategic plan, renewing our strategic plan has come up because prior Soup and Lisa have worked really hard and taken us through much of the existing strategic plan. And we need to think about that. So that would involve the community in a large way. Some of the follow-ups that we talked about that we should probably, when I said I'd circle back earlier to the idea of future agenda items, this is maybe that kind of an area. Strategic planning, about having some conversation about when and where and how to initiate that. Like when does it make sense come in the next however long? A board communication plan. One of the things that came up was the idea of Dr. Iliali and her staff already puts a board memo together for the staff. And maybe that is something that would work also to the community coming from the board. I don't know if we would spin it differently or change it at all, but a fairly easy transition to use our existing channels to send out to the community. Another follow-up item was to start pushing out more board meeting reminders to the community, like the day of or the day before a board meeting. Send out a blast that says, hey, don't forget, we've got a board meeting tonight, and here's the specific links. Watch it on YouTube, click here. Be on Zoom, click here, and maybe an explanation of how that all works underneath it. Just as we had said, to get it at the top of your inbox so that people see it and remember it, because I don't know about anybody else, but my inbox can be anywhere from 10 to 500 deep, depending on the day and whatever's going on. Community, the whole town hall, we talked about that. There were we talked about our board agreements. Board agreements are, I guess you'd call them legacy documents that the board have evolved from board to board to board. Who knows where they originated and how old they are, but they are about how we conduct ourselves in meetings in the community and how we represent the district. It has a lot to do with just the nuts and bolts of a meeting. It has a lot to do with how we refer people in the community back to administration for questions and concerns. But there are a few items in there that needed some touch up, some editing. So that was some of the more of the follow-ups, the board self-evaluation. We had talked about standard operating procedures, and this is one where my notes did not look good. And if
This
anybody
one
could
was,
jump
this
in.
was more, I think Carrie brought up the idea of just as a new board member, having some of those protocols and things ahead of
Yeah.
time.
So
like how
different
to
from
log in.
the,
How to log into board book. and
Onboarding.
Here's your first day. this
oh,
is
so
what
like a
you need
board
to do.
manual, like we had talked about.
Yeah.
That we were going to steal from another district.
Yes,
Borrow.
we definitely will
They
borrow.
offered it.
We
They
will
offered
borrow.
it. It's actually on the IASB website that
Yes.
you can download. Are there other big topics that we talked about as follow-ups that I might have missed? So some of those might be individual agenda items for the future, but there might also be opportunities to group some together. I would recommend we put those items on our list of items to get on future agendas. I don't know that there's an urgency to any one of them that's really critical, but
No, if you wouldn't mind, Shelley and I can work together to kind of space some of these
Yeah,
out.
of
so that-
course.
Yeah. so
and it
that
depends
they're
what's hot
timely.
and what's not,
Yep.
what we need to do. But as long as we have an ongoing list of what we need to get into future agendas, I think just put that on that list.
That sounds good.
We can prioritize them and reprioritize them. Anybody want to add anything else about that meeting? Did you feel like it was worthwhile?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I felt like it should be called a team building instead
Well,
of.
that's kind of what it
self-imposed.
is, yeah.
I'm weird.
And it's a good thing to do regularly. Some boards do it every year.
Yeah.
It might make sense as you guys get a year or two under your belts and feel more comfortable. And it might even be more productive to.
And we can consider a retreat type of a thing in the summer that might not be as structured, but we can have Laura facilitate a different process. Just how did the first year go and those kinds of things.
Definitely
that'd be
worthwhile,
valuable.
though. I thought it was good.
Good. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to move along. And then we're moving on to the Jay Kahn Show, the tentative budget for 2021. Mr. Kahn is going to provide details on the 21-22 tentative budget. This will be brought back in June for approval. That's it. Jay, take it away.
Okay, so the school code, the Illinois State Board of Education requires that when we pass the budget or as part of the budget process, that we formally pass a tentative budget and put it on display for 30 days for the public to review before we pass the final budget. So it's really an effort at transparency. And so that's why we do this in multiple steps. So tonight I will take you through just an overview of what the tentative budget will be. Next meeting in June, you will formally approve a tentative budget, and then it will be posted on our website for viewing by the public for 30 days. We'll actually not pass the final budget until September when it is due, but we'll have it out there longer for people to look at and comment if they wish. And another reason we pass a tentative budget early is just because the final budget is not really adopted until September, which is almost 25% through the fiscal year. And we like to have the board approve a budget before the fiscal year starts, and we operate off of that tentative budget until we pass the final budget. So the first look at next year's budget is the budget is balanced. It's about $18 million in revenue and expense with another $2 million in debt service. We've already gone through some of the revenue assumptions at the last meeting. So I'll go through rather quickly, but the 2020 tax levy that was passed last December will be collected in June and September. So it will be collected in 2021, 1 year in arrears, and that will be all of the operating revenue for next fiscal year. It's up 2.8%, which is about CPI, and about 2.3% on existing property. Debt service is flat. We are expecting our collection rate to be 99.5%, which is average, very typical, and it actually is what we had this year. Interest rates are extremely low. I expect to receive even less interest income than we did this year. And this year we received very little. State revenue assumptions are flat for state funding, and transportation aid will actually be lower by about 75%. But this again is driven by the fact that it's on a reimbursement basis, and we spent so little on transportation this year for that. And then we also have some ESSER grant money, which is the COVID relief funds from the federal government that are available for use for next year. The current year turned out to be, the current year turned out to be a pretty normal year in terms of revenue. So the overlaps from one year to the next look pretty normal. You can see here's the 2.6% or 2.1% total increase, 2.6% in operating funds. Whenever I talk about the budget, I like to break it out between funds for operations, which are kind of recurring funds that we need to operate on a year-to-year basis, and then debt service and capital projects are separate. These funds, capital projects, really we use this fund only when we're doing significant capital work, and then debt service can fluctuate significantly. And both of these funds are separate from the tax levy, so these we treat differently. If you were to look at them all together, you'd see large swings from year to year, and that could distort kind of your regression from year to year. So we look at the education fund, which we also can call the general fund in combination with working cash. Education fund is the least restrictive. We can spend this money on just about anything. The operations and maintenance fund is for operations and maintenance. These are for really facilities. Transportation, self-explanatory, that funds our transportation. IMRF's Social Security, this is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. These are funds we use for pensions for our non-licensed staff. And then working cash is kind of a fund. It's like more of a rainy day fund, or a fund that we build up. We typically don't spend money out of this fund, but we're allowed to transfer it to other funds who need it in case they need it.
Jay, just a couple of softball clarifying kind of questions.
Sure.
You said the IMRF is the non-teaching retirement fund. Is the TRS funds, is that in the education fund?
That is in the education fund. All salaries and benefits for the licensed teaching staff and administration comes out of the education fund.
Yep. And in the IMRF line, is it easy to point to why there's a 16% increase there? Or is it anything like one thing you can point to, or not so much?
Yeah, so this is the revenue side, and this was just a tax levy adjustment that I made. So because these funds are restricted, we were only allowed to use this money to pay for these purposes, and we were building up a fund balance that was too big, essentially. So last year I lowered the levy or extended less taxes in this fund to bring our fund balance down so that we spent more than we took in. And now I've put it back to where it was before. So that accounts for the increase.
So you're just
a big increase, 16%, because it's such a small number relative to the other funds that it doesn't take a lot to change that.
So you're just wiggling things around within your 2.3% CPI increase.
Exactly. We are a tax capped district, and we are limited in what we can levy in overall operating funds, but within that limit, I have flexibility between funds to go up or down as needed.
Right. Thank you.
And then the only other blip here, the capital projects fund, when developers develop property, we receive money from them in impact fees, because these properties won't be taxed for a year. And so if there are any children in those properties that we need to educate, there's a formula that's calculated that they pay kind of in the place of the taxes for us to get revenue in order to be able to fund the education of any students. It's based on the number of bedrooms in those houses, and we received a little bit this year. I did not budget any for next year.
Let me interject there. That's a good learning opportunity. Impact fees is a big deal. If a development like Stonebridge goes live finally after 1 million years and becomes a really big development. And so that developer has to help us figure out a way to educate the kids that are moving into the district. And do we have the space and the property and the buildings and the resources to do that? Interestingly enough, the village is our kind of on behalf negotiator for that. So it is in our best interest to be very involved with any committee work that's done at the village level, working with future development at Stonebridge to know what's going on there. And that has been stalled for years. And so that's why we had actually talked about at one point getting a board member on one of their committees regarding that. But it's been so tied up and it looks like it's not going anywhere right now. But just for future reference, keeping in mind, if that goes anywhere, or if there's any other big developments that are going to put a lot of kids in our district, we really need to be on top of that and represent our needs assertively.
So it's not a flat rate.
I don't know.
It's negotiated every
I'm not sure
year.
exactly how it is, but I remember it feeling inadequate the
Got it.
last time I heard it. Jade might be able to answer that more specifically, but
That's probably a bigger discussion for another time, but there is
Yeah.
a formula that's based on some concrete things, and then the developers can negotiate with the village on that. It's particularly for large developments.
Yeah.
But our
Definitely.
village has been pretty strict in keeping to the formula, especially on the smaller stuff.
definitely a conversation for another time. Sorry to digress. I don't know if you guys had ever heard that before, so.
No problem. There's a lot of vocabulary that is new. So people have seen this pie chart before. Most of our revenue comes from property taxes, with the remaining 10% coming from state, federal, and fees. Even with the large increase in federal spending from the COVID money, it still only accounts for about 3% of our total budget. I'm about to talk about expenditures, and you will see some of these expenditures comparisons look odd just because we're comparing to a COVID year. I didn't want to compare to last year's budget because last year's budget had contingency in it since it was so unpredictable. This year's budget has no contingency. And I felt like what we spent was not comparing to last year's budget wouldn't really give a true or a fair comparison. So I'm comparing to what I'm expecting to spend this year, which is kind of fiscal year to date numbers plus my forecast for the rest of the year. So right off the bat, I'm expecting salaries to go up next year by over 8%. And a lot of this is because this year we paid very few substitute teachers, given our remote learning platform. We also paid fewer stipends because we could not, those are extra duties. We could not hold sports and some other activities that we normally would pay salaries for. So that accounts for really a lot of the increase. In addition, we are hiring 2 staff members next year on a temporary basis, and those are funded by grants. So that also is boosting that comparison. Otherwise, staff is looking at roughly a 3% increase for next year. We have very low staff turnover, and then we have no retirements. Benefits, we're looking at a net increase of almost 4%. And even with our insurance premium decreases, we're seeing this increase in benefits because much of the pension and payroll benefits that we pay are proportional to salary, and salary is going up 8%. So kind of the net of the increase in salary and the proportional benefits offset by our insurance decreases account for that change. Purchase services, our custodial contract is tied to CPI, so it's going up by 1.4%. I'm expecting transportation expenditures to double next year. Again, that's because we really restricted or cut back on transportation this year as a result of the pandemic. We have more and more kids on the buses now that it's safer. and we know more about the virus, but especially at the beginning of the year, we were closing school, and we were also limiting bus transportation for safety reasons. And then we are also in purchase services, have an additional 1.0 FTE of special education teacher through our special education cooperative. Technology, we're doing the wireless infrastructure upgrade that is later in the board meeting for approval, and replacing the projectors at the elementary school. For capital, we're looking at our access control, which is basically our building security system, the key fob entry system. We've got some boiler work to do at the elementary school, and looking at purchasing some new snow removal and grounds maintenance equipment. And then our special education outplacements are flat. These are students who we don't have the ability to provide the services in-house, so we send them to our special education cooperative for their placement. So looking at our total expenditures, our education fund is up 6%. Our transportation fund, this is the big one, 96%. O&M about 5%. In general, we're looking at increasing our spending and operating funds by 7.6%. And then our debt service is pretty flat. So a net 7% increase over this year in spending. However, we did spend less this year in operations. And then looking at it by the object, which is a little bit easier to think about. Here's the 8.3% and the 3.9% for salaries and benefits. Seeing a 25% purchase services increase. Again, that's because our transportation is a purchase service. So that's really driving that. We're also outsourcing some additional staff. And then supplies are lower. This is a reflection of the fact that we spent a lot on supplies for COVID last year, PPE and safety equipment specifically. And so we're going to see our supply spending go back to normal. Capital spending will be about the same, and our dues and fees spending will be a slight increase. That is really driven by our special education funding. Just looking at kind of how our spending breaks out, 2/3 of our spending are salaries and benefits. If you count debt service, excluding debt service, it'd be more like 75%. And then purchase services are also largely personnel related. This is food service and transportation and night custodial. So again, just looking at the portion of our budget that is spent on, actual stuff, it's about 5% of our total budget to buy things. And then a quick look at our debt service. This is our debt service for next year. The different colors represent our different bond issues. And so you can see that we are pretty much flat in debt service spending out to 2029. And then the only thing remaining is the debt service that was issued for the middle school, which extends out to 2035. We just refinanced this reflects some bonds we refinanced in April, given the really low interest rates, and we saved about $400,000 last April in that refinancing.
Jay, let me just interject on that chart too. Even though they say the dates are current, look very recent for the refunding bonds, the bigger numbers have to do with the elementary school. When we built that in 08, 09, I think was when
that is correct. Most of our debt, almost all of our debt that we have on the books, $28 million was issued to construct the elementary school in 2009. And over the years that has been refinanced in parts as interest rates have come down. I think we've refinanced almost all of it, actually 100% of it, and saved $4 or $5 million in interest over the time as well for taxpayers.
I think we've pretty much exhausted the opportunity for refinancing, probably, right?
We are there, but we have our financial advisor does keep an eye on it. So if there are any potential opportunities, we will bring them to the board at that time.
Great.
Then I always close with a look at our fund balance. This chart includes the projected ending fund balance for this year, which really could change quite a bit still. And then, next year it's a balanced budget. So I'm expecting really no change in fund balance from next year. And we're expecting to end next year or end this year at about 41% of operating expenditures, which is in our new fund balance policy, which is the same as our old fund balance policy in terms of this ratio that's in the new policy manual expects us to hold 30 to 50% of our annual operating expenditures in fund balance. That's the range we like to stay in. And so this is squarely in the middle of that range.
Jay, I don't think you're showing the trend chart on fund balance, are you? Do you have that tonight or no?
I do not, no. I really would prefer to wait until the year is over so that we have a number for this year, because it's going to be still a lot of variability in that, and that's going to be a big impact this year.
Understood, but so I want to just talk to a point on fund balance. So you'll often have people in the community asking you, why did you take the full 2.3% CPI increase? Because I don't know if you guys have had this training yet, but we're what's called a PTEL district, property tax extension law, something law, that tells us that we can only raise our taxes by the lower of 5% or CPI. CPI that we're using this year, I believe, is 2.3%. We don't have to take all of that, and we're often criticized for taking all of that. But Jay runs these projections that show where our fund balance goes over 5 years out. And even with taking the full CPI, our fund balance is starting to creep lower and lower and lower. So as we approach that 5-year mark, it's getting really close to dipping below our minimum level. So that's one simple answer to people when they ask you, why'd you take the full CPI? You know, the village didn't, or so I don't know who did this year, but sometimes like the park district might not have, or the high school didn't for whatever their reasons. And we're looking out for the finances of the school. So just so you know, that's one quick answer. It's not a simple answer. There's always more to it than that, but that's something that you can respond with.
When I present the final budget in September, I'll have the long 5-year projections to present at the same time, and we'll have the discussion about fund balance. I will say that we have, I think, 7 or 8 teachers have declared their retirement. You'll see in your personnel report tonight. So that's going to impact the curvature of that line as we grant large salary increases over the next several years to some of our staff.
Is that it, Jay?
That is it.
Any questions for Mr. Khan?
Thanks, Jay.
As usual, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so now we're going to go to action items. And we are going to start with the first 4 of these: property casualty insurance, workers' comp, hazardous routes, and authorized depository approval are things you're going to see every year, no matter what. It's very common. They're almost routine, but there's a fair amount of money in there, so we need to vote on all this and take it very seriously. But I just want to give you a heads up that this is stuff you'll see again and again and again. So the property item A, 9A, the property casualty insurance policy for 21-22. It's an annual approval. It represents an 8% increase versus the prior year, up to about $66,218. And that 8% increase is vastly due to a 220% increase in the cyber liability portion of that, which we've talked about a little bit about how that's really going up. Jay, the only thing I was hoping you could add to is if you could give a little bit of a tick off of the different kinds of things that are included in property casualty insurance, just so people know that there's a whole laundry list of stuff that is covered by that.
Yeah, we cover it's general liability, so property coverage. So if you're like, there's damage to the buildings, general liability, which includes sexual abuse coverage, and then any kind of, if anybody falls or gets injured on our property, automobile coverage, crime, boiler and machinery coverage, school board legal coverage, to name a few.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Khan on this? All right, so may I have a motion to approve the property casualty insurance policy for 21 and 22 school year as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Have a second? Do a roll call vote on that? Ian?
Lauren Hirsch,
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach,
Yes.
Tim Penich,
Yes.
Andy Duran,
Yes.
Ann Hill, yes, Mark Barry.
Yes. Motion's approved. Item B, worker compensation insurance. This is an annual approval for workers' compensation renewals. The total is $29,014. It represents a 23% decrease versus the prior year. And I believe that's because we shopped it out a little bit. Jay, if you could just enlighten us on that decrease.
Sure, we're seeing a decrease, one, because we're a small district. We outsource many of the functions where employees have the highest workers' comp claims, which would be custodial, food service, and transportation. Every year we do go and do a bid or a competitive look at the different companies, and then we just had really good experience. So that accounts for the decrease.
Any other questions on that?
I did also just want to point out that this year we are getting an additional service with our policy. Several other districts have this service, and it's really valued by both staff, and it also keeps costs down. It's like a nurse line. So if an employee does get injured on the job, they call a phone number, they speak to a live registered nurse. The nurse takes all the information from the accident, tells them where to go for the appropriate level of care. You need to go to the emergency room, or you need to go to urgent care, or you need to schedule an appointment with your doctor, take 2 aspirin, whatever. And then they take all the information. So they get that, make sure that the claims can get started as soon as possible. So if an employee does need to file a claim, they typically now they have to call us, we have to call the insurance company, and it takes a while for that to get into motion. So now if they go to the hospital can get that right away. And then it also lowers costs because we get the right information up front if they're in the event of any claims, and it takes a lot of work off of our staff in filling out paperwork. So we're really excited about this additional service.
Makes sense. Any questions, comments, concerns here? All right. So may I have a motion to approve the workers' compensation insurance for 21-22 as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
Carrie Steinbach,
Yes.
Tim Penich,
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Ann Hill, yes. Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Hazardous routes resolution for 21-22. Pursuant to Public Act 94-0439, the board is required by law to annually review the hazardous conditions. The annual resolution should remain on file in the district for audit purposes. This is also done annually, and there's been no change from previous years. According to what I looked at, it looked like it dates back to the 80s with little or no change. The reason we do this is, one of the reasons we do this as well is that we can get some partial reimbursement from the state for transportation costs. Any other further questions for Mr. Khan on this?
I just have a quick question, just
Sure.
because I don't know. One of the hazardous routes refers to West School. Is that, we don't have kids there anymore, so I was just curious.
Not
as
for a
to-
very long time,
Right, right.
but we do use the
No.
streets.
Okay, I didn't know if it's still.
I don't know
not-
if that's the answer,
Yeah.
but I think it is.
It's really just a route for them to come to, if they were going to the bus stop, or if they were going to be trying to walk or bike to school from there. So it still maintains a hazard. It's actually more than 1.5 miles, I believe, but if it were less than that, then it would present a hazard if a student was trying to walk or bike from home to school in our current location. But these routes do date back to the 80s. We actually had significantly more of them, and then they were reviewed again in 2017. And because many things had changed since the 80s, we eliminated many of the routes and many of the hazards that were no longer present.
All right, thank you, sorry.
So that was my question. It has been reviewed since 83, and it's not
Yeah.
more hazardous than it was in the 80s?
Well, we review them every year based on criteria. There's like a point system that the Illinois Department of Transportation has that's based on sidewalks, how far they are from the street, the level of traffic and the speed, and whether the presence of traffic lights or crossing guards, things of that nature. And then there's a formula, and if it's over a certain amount of points, the school board also has, I think, the authority or the discretion to add some 1 or 2 points at their discretion. And then there's a rating scale to determine whether it's hazardous or not. These were deemed hazardous back in 1983 and 1988 when they were applied for. We reviewed all of the hazardous routes in 2017 and put them through that rubric, and these 3 remained hazardous routes. So we've left them on the list and continue to reapprove them every year. The other ones were no longer met the criteria as a hazardous route, and so we took them off and no longer approve them annually.
Does that make sense to everybody? Further questions or comments, concerns? So may I have a motion to approve the hazardous routes resolution for 21-22 as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Tim Penich,
Yes.
Andy Duran,
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry,
Yes,
Lauren Hirsch,
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
motion is approved. Item D, before we go on, Tim, your question about West School. Wait till we have the opportunity to pay for repair work on the stoplight by
Oh,
West
yeah,
School. That might come back again sometime. We had that a few years ago. There's a traffic light over there that somehow we found out that we're sort of financially responsible for it. That came out of the woodwork a few years ago. Okay, authorized depository approval. For best practices, internal controls, the board is asked to each year to approve our existing banking relationships. Jay, if you want to add anything, please do. Is he still there?
Where'd he go?
Yep, can you not see me?
Yeah, you can hear you. That's good enough. But for the basic, I don't know if this is possible, but as briefly as possible, can you explain to us what are internal controls and why is that important?
Internal controls are the controls that we have in place to ensure that money is not misappropriated. So setting up structures like having different multiple signatures on a check, or one person depositing the money and another person reconciling the accounts, those types of things. And so part of actually our board policy 430 requires us to have the board approve the depositories, and it also lays out the criteria for the types of investments that we can use and the types of collateral that we require, so that we can't put our money in risky investments or in savings and loans that are not either collateralized or have FDIC insurance. And it's really to preserve the taxpayer dollars.
Yeah. That makes sense to you guys?
Mhm.
Any further questions for Mr. Khan on the depositories? All right, may I have a motion to approve the authorized depository as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second, roll call vote, please.
Andy Duran,
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry,
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch,
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach,
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Motion's approved. By the way, there might be a time when we come out of the governor's declaration of the pandemic exceptions, or whatever they call them, that we have to do things differently, that we don't have to do a roll call vote on everything.
Oh.
The rule has to do with money. If it's going to affect the district's spending or finances, yes, roll call vote. But if it's, I don't know, can't come up with
It's
an
like, should
example
we
right
adjourn
now.
this meeting? We can all.
Yeah, you can always do all in favor. Yeah.
Not that we're thinking about that.
Not that I'm projecting.
Hopefully we'll get back to that someday. Yeah, not that we're thinking about that. Item E is the fine arts computer purchase. As discussed at our May 11th committee of the whole meeting, administration recommends that the board approve the purchase of 24 MacBook computers for the fine arts program at a cost of approximately $43,000. Just as a reminder, these are going to be shared across all the grades who use that program. And one of the reasons is the old ones are worn out, but the Chromebooks just don't have the support capability, the power to do what we need those computers to do. Is there any questions or comments, concerns about any of that? If anybody's interested in the details, who's watching, we did have a long discussion about that at the last meeting. So not hearing any questions, may I have a motion to approve the fine arts computer purchase as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Andy Duran,
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Item F, Quest Food Service for 21-22. Also discussed at the May 11th Committee of the Whole meeting. The board is asked to approve the agreement with Quest Food Management Services to provide a financial guarantee that the current food service intergovernmental agreement with Lake Forest School District 67 will cost the district a maximum of $60,000 for the 2021-2022 school year, fiscal year. Any questions, comments, concerns? Not hearing any. May I have a motion to approve the Quest Food Service Program for 2021-2022 as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second. Roll call vote, please.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Item G, IT infrastructure upgrade for the elementary school. As discussed at the May 11th Committee of the Whole, the board is asked to approve a contract to upgrade the wireless infrastructure at the elementary school at a total cost of $58,376. Just as a reminder, when we talked about this at the last meeting, it was explained that this kind of infrastructure upgrade is pretty common and happens every 5 years or so. Again, all these things that were discussed at the Committee of the Whole are available to be reviewed on the videotapes that are on our website if anybody's interested in the why of how we got to this point. Any questions, comments, or concerns from the board? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the IT infrastructure upgrade at the elementary school as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second? I'll second. I'll do that too. Roll call vote, please.
Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes.
Motion's approved. Board policy manual first read. Can I borrow this? I'm gonna ask all of you
This is
a
fun.
question. Did you read page 300? No. So this is what our amazing policy committee worked on. Sorry. Didn't mean to
That's
grab
good.
that
No,
out of
it's
your
good.
hand. And I just, again, really appreciate all your guys' work, past and present boards. Thank you. Does the policy committee have any issues other than what was discussed on legacy, naming of buildings and what's the
Awards and
word?
scholarships.
Awards and scholarships? Other than that, is there any issues that we want to highlight before we vote?
I have one, and I'm sorry, I should have brought this up last week
problem.
and I forgot about it at the meeting and then found it in my notes today. But in policy 262, which is about tutoring and everything, I didn't know if we should have language similar to the social activity policy about notifying the district if a teacher is providing tutoring services to a student.
The one that we talked about before.
Yeah.
I have this private tutoring policy on our list to discuss a little bit later because
Okay.
in our, we did have a lot of discussion around student-teacher relationships and one-on-one interactions. And so I asked our attorneys to look around for some other board policies that address those pieces. And we have some sample policies that we're going to be looking at. So I think that's a great point, Tim. We can look at inserting some of that language in here as
And-
well as in the ethics policy.
Okay, there is some of those samples I thought were
Yeah.
good.
So we
add-ons,
definitely are going to revisit
Okay,
those.
I just wanted to add,
Great.
add
That's a
that.
good catch.
Yep. Thank you.
We've had those kinds of conversations on and off for years, and it's always a tricky thing to work through. Any other questions or comments on any of that?
I have one other thing, sorry.
Oh.
This isn't
Did you read the
a,
whole book?
Tim
no,
Penich
no,
has
I
the
just
floor.
wanted
I think
to,
he may have.
I think he
I,
did.
I knew this was contentious a few years ago, but
Yeah. Why not bring
policy
it up again?
820, which is on community use with schools. It looks
On
like
what?
there were
On-
community use of schools.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yes.
It looks like there were
Weddings and
some
things.
minor changes, but I just wanted to confirm that based on my looking at it, the spirit of the previously approved policy appears to stay the same. So I know that we're trying to be a good neighbor and the neighbors are concerned about that, so I just wanted to say something about that.
We are always trying to be a good neighbor, and we will do everything we can to notify them ahead of time of anything that's going on and involve them in the process. So
Did we change that one from?
We
what
kept
it
the
was-
language.
It was like minor changes
Yeah.
at the
Okay.
beginning.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had discussed that one at length.
At length.
yeah, so it
previously,
hasn't
yeah.
gotten away from where it was prior. I mean, nobody should be scared who lives in the vicinity of the school that would change anything
Nope.
back.
No, you made it better.
That's a great point.
All right, so no other questions, comments, concerns? We have a motion to approve the board policy manual first read as presented by the administration.
So moved.
Second,
Roll call vote, please.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry.
Yes,
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
motion is approved. Personnel report. Okay, bear with me, guys. I've got to read this. The personnel report for tonight's meeting for this month includes a lot of individual items, so, and I am required to read them all.
Oh.
It includes the following retirements. I need my glasses for this.
Sorry.
Eric Owens, teaching assistant at the middle school effective June 10th. He's moving. Nancy Ark, teaching assistant at the elementary school effective June 10th, retiring. Linda Rosenthal, teaching assistant at the elementary school effective June 10th, retiring. Denise Salet, teacher at the elementary school effective June 25th, retiring. Dylan Martin, teaching assistant, elementary school, June 10th, moving. Non-licensed new hire, Ellie Thomas, a teaching assistant at the middle school, effective the 21-22 school year, replacing Eric Owens for $15 an hour. Family Medical Leave Act, we have Hector Martinez in maintenance at the elementary school, effective April 26th of this year through July 15th. Eric Andrico in wellness at the elementary school, effective August 23rd through October 4th of this year. Anna Groff, a teacher at the middle school, effective for the 21-22 school year, taking a leave of absence. Then, so this is the recommendation to hire list. That continues with these three as well. Okay. So for summers, and those are all summer school
Yes.
issues. So we
Yep.
have a number of temporary recommendations to hire for the free summer school that we're offering this year, right? Eric Anderko is a summer school teacher for, I'm gonna also summarize something here, just make sure. Yeah, all the dates are the same, from June 14th to July 9th. And all the salaries except one are the same at $41 an hour, so I will highlight the one that's different. So Eric Anderko, a summer school teacher for 68 hours. Emily Anderson, a speech and language teacher for 68 hours. Brian Bankhead.
Brianna.
Brianna Bankhead, a summer school teacher for 68 hours. Tim Burks, school psychologist, social worker for 20 hours. Megan Kelly, summer school teacher for 68 hours. Brett Kreiner, extended school year teacher for 68 hours. Allison Meyer, summer school teacher for 68 hours. Tim Mooney, summer school teacher for 68 hours. Eric Owens, extended school year teacher for 68 hours. Jen Perlis Glassman, a social worker for 20 hours. Lynn Persky, extended school year teacher for 68 hours. Angie Rahuf, occupational therapist for 4 hours. Ryan Regan, summer school teacher for 68 hours. Kelly Sheridan, summer school teacher for 68 hours. Jackie Tivador for a fixed salary of $3,250. She oversees the summer program. And Jill Weinberger, a teacher for 68 hours. Finally, we have the non-licensed temporary recommendations to hire. Lori Bugioni, extended school year teaching assistant. These are just another, I'm going to lump some things together. The effective dates for all of these are June 14th through July 19th of 2021. So Lori Bugioni, extended school year teaching assistant for $18.40 an hour, 64 hours. Kelly Doro, the school nurse for $40 an hour for 64 hours. Andrea Fuentes, school secretary for $18 an hour for 80 hours, 7:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. each day. Maria Gonzalez, extended school year teaching assistant $15.45 an hour for 64 hours. Joanna Mossbarger, Senate School Year Teaching Assistant, $15 an hour for 64 hours. Heidi Thomas, Summer School Teaching Assistant, $15 an hour for 60 hours. And Mindy Trobow. I apologize to anybody whose name I'm sure that's on me. Senate School Year Teaching Assistant, $19.95 an hour for 64 hours. Okay, so that is the personnel report. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns about that? They're not normally that long. Okay, we have a motion to approve the May 25th, 2021 personnel report, regular and summer, as presented by the administration.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Motion's approved. And our final action item for the night, I think. Consent agenda, that's always the last one, includes the following items. The open session meeting minutes for April 27th, 2021, regular Board of Ed and reorganization meeting. The May 11th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting, the May 20th, 2021 Policy Review Committee meeting, the closed session meeting minutes from May 19th, 2021 Board of Education self-evaluation meeting, the treasurer's report, the impressed report, the bills report, the P card report, and the resolution to transfer funds from contingency. Now, you know, you have the opportunity to withdraw any of these from the consent agenda if you want to discuss them separately. Would anybody like anything withdrawn? If not, so we can vote on them in mass. May I have a motion to approve the May 25th, 2021 consent agenda as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes. Mark Barry. Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
The motion's approved. That's it for action items. We had one very ordinary FOIA request, the details of which are in your board packet if anybody's interested. Do we have any public comment, whether written or in Zoom? Anybody raising their hand in Zoom that wants to make comment? All right, thanks. If anybody has public comment, they're always welcome to email myself or Dr. Leali or the board in general. Any questions, comments, concerns, things from the board that anybody wants to raise or bring up? Thanks. So at 8:24.
Nine.
Oh,
Nine.
9. Oh, this is what happens after 9 and like, look, we ran a little late.
I think it's at
9:23.
9:23. May I have a motion to adjourn at 9:23 PM?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mark Barry.
Yes.
Lauren Hirsch.
Yes.
Carrie Steinbach.
Yes.
Tim Penich.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Anne Hill, yes.
Motion's approved.